Here I am making block 5. It's called Propeler. In this block, I am going to choose a color. I've got 2 greens, an orange, and a pink already. So the next color I'm going to choose is a turquoise color. And as all the others, I am going to make up my grid. I need 4 half square triangles that are going to measure 8 1/2 inches when they're finished. And I need 4 color blocks and 5 background blocks, all 4 1/2 inches. So here are my blocks cut already. I'm going to start by sewing half square triangles on those big blocks. So I take 1 turquoise block and 1 background block, and I draw a diagonal line across the wrong side of the block. Then it's time to sew a 1/4 inch seam on either side of that line. And since they're big blocks, it doesn't take a long amount of time to sew the diagonal. And whenever I can, I am going to chain piece. So here is the next one all ready to go. I just put it under the presser foot and continue my sewing line. When I get to the end of that one, I will just turn the blocks around and sew on the other side of the line. It doesn't take long. And when I finish the second one, I will trim the blocks and cut along the diagonal, either with the scissors, or I can lay them on my cutting table and use the ruler and rotary blade. Either is acceptable. It's not going to bother me either way. It's a nice long line. It's easy to cut with the scissors. It's easy to cut with a rotary cutter if you lay it down on the cutting table. So once I have them separated, all I need to do is press the seam to one side. I always like pressing those to one side. I know some people like to press them open. That's preference. I just press all my seams to one side. Then the next thing you have to do is just give those big blocks a bit of a trim so they measure the correct size. Eight 1/2 inch squares. Once I get it trimmed to size, I will start laying them out on the table in the orientation I have on my diagram grid. Because these blocks are big, you can just start laying them together, and they're so easy to make and fast. And I like the fact that they are quite dynamic in nature. There's a lot of motion in those and lots of color. So just a bit of time, almost ready to sew these big blocks together. Doesn't take long. Always use your rulers accurately. There's a nice line on all of those square up rulers that you can just use. I think I need to get my blade sharpened. So you just use that diagonal line and you will see exactly where you need to lay it and how to trim those blocks so they're going to fit into the pattern and make a nice squared pattern. So there's the last one, last diagonal. I'll place that in the corner in the right orientation, get it sorted out so I do it correctly, and then lay the rest of those blocks down to create the pattern. So sewing these together is quite easy. Just sew the 4.5-inch blocks together in a unit, and then sew 2 half-square triangles, 1 to either side. It really doesn't take long, and once you have your straight lines, you can just stitch those up very quickly. So I think the rest of this video is just me stitching. It's good to give those seams a press so they look nice and crisp when they're finished. Normally when I am sewing, I have some music playing. I don't like to watch TV while I'm sewing, but I do like to play music. So when I'm making these videos, it's kind of quiet, and it's hard not to just sit there and talk. So I've been recording these videos for 2 years now. I don't know if I'm getting any better, but they seem to work out, and people seem to like them, so I'll continue to do it. I like this particular project because the blocks are really big and it goes really fast. It's a good beginner project, that's for sure. I think most of my quilts are making good use of the things that I have, for one. I haven't gone out to buy a lot of fabric recently, so people keep giving me scraps and I keep finding ways to put them together, so that's kind of nice too. 2022 was a pretty good year. I donated a lot of quilts to a lot of people. And I really have fun just sitting and sewing. It's a pretty good hobby. So you see that I sort out the quilt pieces in segments, and I always try to keep the longest rows I can make available. And so when I get a section put together, then I can sew it to the section next to it. I just have to remember whether I'm keeping the seams pressed open or keeping them to one side, or how you have to make sure that you match up the seams at the proper places on what you're sewing so that they look nice when they're done and they look like they're put together correctly. So every time I stop, I just check to make sure that the seam is lying in the correct direction and making sure that the seam allowances are even. And in that way, you get a block that is the correct size when you're finished. Every time I finish a section, because they're quite big and I only have a small ironing table right beside my sewing area, I just press the seam and make sure that it's going to be lying in the correct direction before I go on to the next one. And you see, I only have one more section to sew on to the side. This is going to be finished in just a couple of minutes. This is pretty much real-time sewing. It doesn't take long to make these blocks. I keep saying that. I like the fact that they're easy to make. I've got to think of a way that I'm going to put them together when I'm finished, because each of the blocks, there'll be 3 across and 4 down because there's 12 blocks altogether. I have to think whether I want to make something around the outside or whether I don't think I want to put sashing on it, but I'm having a think about how I'm going to put them together. I think I'll have some of the background fabric left over and not much of the pieces that I'm using as the color, focus colors. Anyway, I've got some time left. There's a block a month. I've got time left to figure out how I'm going to sew them together at the end. Block of months always seem to be so long. They take forever to make. Put things away after you finish making the block, and then come back to it later, and then you get it out again and put something away. I'd rather sort of make something all together at one time and have it done. But this block is just about finished. I'm finishing off the last bit, and then I can go on and do something else. Oh, I see my thread on the top is coming to an end as well, so I better get this one finished before I have to rethread. Doesn't it always happen that when you're just about finished, the thread runs out either in the bobbin or the top thread, and then you have to stop and put some more thread in? Anyway, lamenting. It's always something to think about. Ta-da! Am I going to smile? Yeah, there I did. It's put together. Now a quick press, and I'll put it up on the wall. Check it out to make sure that it's finished in the right way. And I like the fact that it's a blue. It's going to be a great color up there on the wall with those others. I've got some nice colors to add to this project. Not too much of each of those, but you know how it is. See you next time.